Today we're going to be listening to a panel about housing challenges. This might seem obvious, but can you tell us why housing affordability is important, especially for older adults?
Well, thank you. Is this on?
Oh,
That's the button. Okay, got the green light. All right, hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. I think this is a great question to ground us. Let's start with the definition of what we mean by affordable housing. Generally, we think of housing as being affordable when someone has to spend no more than 30% of their income on their housing costs, including their utilities. So just to sort of ground us for a moment, for someone with an income, one-person household with an income of about $25,000 per year, that would mean that their housing costs, their maximum rent, should be no more than about a little more than $600 per year. And we obviously all know that that's something that the private market is not currently able to provide in the city of Seattle. This is an especially critical issue for low-income households and for seniors. Looking at the latest data from the American Community Survey, half of senior households that live alone, so essentially another way of saying that one-person senior households have an annual income of $25,000 or less. So we know that in the city of Seattle, there are many senior households that cannot afford market rate rents and really do need affordable housing to be able to stay in the city and be able to have income for other expenses like medicine or food or other necessities. Sort of a similar data point from a slightly older report, 25% of households with older adults are unable to afford the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in King County without assistance. I think that's from like 2018, so we all know that that statistic has not gotten better in the intervening years.
Absolutely, thank you. So Inye, I want to come to you. Wari is an art space, as I mentioned before, dedicated to belonging, Black joy, and the tradition of community organizing that your family is intimately involved in. And it's in the middle of the CD that, as we mentioned before, is rapidly gentrifying and is changing. And right now, the program that you are particularly working on is focusing on Black seniors' home ownership and also home ownership opportunities and maintaining home ownership. So can you tell us why this space and Black home ownership is important? And with that, can you share some of the unique challenges that you've seen and heard Black older adults face when it comes to owning property amidst this greater housing crisis?
Yeah, right. So I think just to really sort of frame out, how we do our work. So we use art as at Wari as a way of convening folks in our community to discuss critical issues. And one of those issues that is really at the heart of why we founded our organization is the retention of Black owned homes. And obviously, as was referred to in our opening remarks, there's a long legacy, of policy-driven and market force-driven conditions that have made seniors in our community particularly vulnerable and made the prospect of aging in place difficult for a lot of folks. And so our work is really focused on convening folks, to address, those long-term systemic issues, and as artists to bring a creative eye into, imagining what are some future-oriented solutions. And so the work that we do is around bringing together Black homeowners to rebuild a sense of community and mutual aid for folks that are still geographically close together, living in the neighborhood, although most of our community has been dispersed across several counties in Western Washington. The folks that are still in the neighborhood are living largely isolated lives, right? And so they do communicate with family members, but a lot of them are far away. And so just rebuilding that sense of community and connectedness is a critical first step. Being able to transform that connectedness into various forms of mutual aid, and in our work that is specifically related to, how do we, how do folks who are aging in place, how do you continue to afford to stay there? Property taxes obviously is probably the biggest concern for most folks, but there are a host of other issues that are related to maintaining a house, right, as an older person, right? Of course, there's the escalating cost of repairs and everything, but then there's just that, the notion of being able to keep up with being aware of everything that's happening in your home. So there are a whole host of things that come along with community connectedness that are critical to the work that we do, right? And so our work has a longer term goal of actually addressing policy. So, as we get homeowners engaged in this work, engaged with one another, creating systems of mutual aid, rebuilding those relationships based on the current configuration of our communities in this geographic location, really having folks then begin to pivot and look at very specific policy issues on the city, county, and state level. To begin to imagine how can we remap the policy landscape so that there are lower barriers for folks to be able to afford to stay in their homes. And so there are a wide range of possible solutions that we imagine, as we look towards that. So I guess what I'm wanting to lay out in response to your question is that, these are complex, multi-layered issues. They're not single, they're not siloed issues. Right? And so our approach to this work is not siloed. We do start our work with, the reality of community building, which, for us is family building, right? It's about, maintaining those human connections as like the first front of maintaining sort of human and social viability.
Excellent, beautiful. Thank you so much. Really quick, just before we go on, I want to ask you one thing, Inye. Can you define mutual aid for us?
Yeah, it's one of those things, kind of a fuzzy term, right?
Right.
And so I think it for us, mutual aid. So our work as organizers really making sure that we put, and so I'll use some organizers language. When we're activating our base, when we're bringing folks together, we want to place their priorities at the forefront, right? So, I usually shy away from saying, well, what does mutual aid look like? Because in our organizing strategy, as we bring folks together, our goal is to really center their agency in defining what it is that they need. How do they need to come together? We realize that at this point in history, we're facing, unprecedented conditions. Right, and so we're really focused on imaginative thinking about how we need to support one another, right? So mutual aid in our context and the work that we're looking at can be about, well, how do we do like effective resource sharing? Right. Like finding reliable contractors. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
How do we get people we can trust to help us sort out, estate issues, multi-generational wealth issues,
right.
End of life, sort of wealth issues. These are all things that come up, begin to surface, that are at the forefront of people's concerns that probably, if you had asked us about mutual aid 30 years ago, you had a whole different set of priorities. So.
Exactly. So mutual support in order to address those conditions. So that's actually perfect. Thank you for that. So that's actually a really great lead-in to the next question I have for Mary Rita about GenPride. So Mary Rita, I know GenPride is in the process of building Washington State's first LGBTQIA+ affirming affordable housing. So tell us a little bit more about GenPride as an organization, as an initiative, and also what's significant of this affordable housing project, and what challenges do LGBTQIA+ folks face as they age?
In 2 minutes?
I said ish.
Right,
ish.
I'm from the East Coast. Here I go.
Yeah, okay. Don't worry, I see. It's okay.
All right. So, hi, everybody. GenPride is a not-for-profit that focuses on the health and well-being of LGBTQIA+ older adults. We were started in 2015, and it's located in King County. We're the only LGBTQI senior center in the state. And currently, we provide no-cost access to fitness and education programs, social services, and recreational activities to address isolation and promote companionship. And it's at 1519 Broadway, right in the heart of Capitol Hill. So we're super excited. We're up on, I think it's going to be 8 stories, and they're up to level 6. So go on and look. And Cliff, that was a great question. This building is really an outstanding accomplishment, and one that could not have been achieved without many partnerships and significant people doing their part. Pride Place is a partnership with Community Roots Housing and GenPride. This building will contain 118 affordable housing units owned and managed by Community Roots Housing. GenPride will be located on the ground floor, managing about 4,400 square feet for a senior community and health services center with LGBTQI focused services. As some of you may know, GenPride was formed by the UW Aging with Pride department led by GenPride's founder, Dr. Karen Fredrickson Goldson, who published the first ever study to determine if LGBTQ people age differently than the general population. And this study was first done nationally and followed about 2,500 seniors for over a decade to answer this question. We knew in the community, anecdotally, that we age differently, but securing this data proved significant in making a case to fund specialized services. So GenPride received its first funding grant from the City of Seattle in 2016 to start this work, and we continue to receive support from the city and the county. So just quickly in a nutshell, from that survey, only 15% LGBTQ seniors access senior services. And that 15% fear accessing health care services outside of our community. 52% of them feel that they lack companionship, and 54% of these adults feel isolated from others. While some of these attributes can be ascribed to all seniors, the study revealed that these percentages, like isolation and companionship, are nearly double than what is in the general population. This is why specialized services for our community are so crucial and Pride Place essential for our community.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I didn't even have to use cane. Like, it's amazing. Yeah. Anyway, if you don't know that reference, it's a very East Coast thing. Anyway, the Apollo, great institution. So, Emily, your organization, the Northeast Seattle Together, or NEST, aims to help older adults age in place by connecting them with neighbors and resources. Can you talk us through the village model, and what are some of the needs of older adults commonly what are some of the common needs of older adults when trying to age in place, and how can neighborhood connections in this village model help in that regard?
Well, thank you so much. Am I close enough? There we go. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be able to be here today and share with everyone what the Village Movement is. It began 20 years ago in the Boston area in Beacon Hill neighborhood, and it's built on the premise that these are community-based, grassroots nonprofit organizations that connect members with practical support resources and social connections to enable them to live at home or where they choose to live, or wherever they call home, live active, independent, and healthy lives for as long as they choose to live in that area. Villages were created to build a sense of community and to offer various services and programs and activities to build social connections and opportunities for movement and activity, physical activity. And for those who need that extra help, and this is where we come in terms of helping people age in place, is that we have a network of volunteers who provide an array of resources from driving to appointments, light home maintenance, technical help, and something that we provide that's called friendly visits. And so every village looks different. There are 7 in the greater Seattle area, and to say that you've seen one, you've truly seen one, because each one is built to reflect the needs of that community. So for example, from NEST perspective, we have 2 different levels of membership. One is a social membership, which provides all of these opportunities for engagement and connection and meeting people that they may not have otherwise met. And so we have all kinds of physical activities. We've got walking groups, Feldenkrais, Qigong, the insanely popular pickleball. We have all kinds of support groups, low vision, on our own again, and that's for people who have recently lost a partner. We have men's support groups, women's support groups. We have interest groups, which are all member-driven and led by their interests. So we've got science and poetry. Conversational Spanish is kicking off this month, and my personal favorite is our soup group, the Supremes. And then we have an array of educational activities as well. We just completed a 2-part fall prevention workshop. Every year we have an incredibly popular series called Making the End of Life a Part of Life. And then we do tons of social things. Pre-pandemic times, there were lots of field trips and outings to wineries, that kind of thing. But then where villages really come in is with our full access membership, which gives you access to our network of volunteers. And in response to your question, the most common needs that we see are transportation, to medical appointments, to the grocery store, hair appointments, you name it. Yard work and help around the house with minor repairs, changing light bulbs, perhaps building a ramp to help access into the home. And then our third most common is what we call our friendly visits, which is basically helping them combat social isolation in a myriad of ways. It could be sitting with them while they open their mail, going with them for a walk around the neighborhood, going for coffee, playing a card game. And the way that we feel that these neighborhood connections address these issues is that we're creating opportunities for them to meet people that they may not have otherwise known in their neighborhood. And we also are a resource to the entire community, not just our members. The general public reaches out to us on a regular basis, particularly adult children who are looking for resources for their parents who are trying to age in place. Oh, and if I have time, the one last thing that was mentioned earlier is that we also provide a directory of vetted vendors for our members, because oftentimes it's really hard for them to find service providers, be an electrician, plumber, that kind of thing, that they feel like they can trust and they're not going to get scammed, and they're confident in knowing because we have a committee that does background, does these vetted checks and backgrounds and references and all of that. And so that is another resource that we provide to our members.
Good to know. Excellent. Thank you. Also, you forgot one activity, karaoke. Yes.
It's come up, but I keep saying that a member has to lead that because it's not on me.
I'm glad to hear that. Also, shameless plug for our home repair program that actually does a number of the repairs you're talking about to aging homes. So, just feel free to go in the back, take a look at some of the information that Christina and Jess have. Hey, y'all. Back there, and so I'm going to go a little faster just so we can get in more questions. So unfortunately, I will have to be a bit of a time tyrant, so I apologize in advance if I interrupt, but just know I do it with love. Anyway, that being said, Inye, so gentrification, I mentioned it earlier, and we know that it is at the heart of displacement in many parts of Seattle, particularly in historic BIPOC communities. So can you describe what this looks like, what this feels like from some of the experiences you've heard, whether people close to you or people in the community, and also what policies and regulations do you think should be put into place to protect older adults as well as BIPOC communities as a whole from gentrification?
Okay, 2 minutes?
Yeah, about that.
Right. Okay, so, just to
Again, I'll interrupt with love.
Yeah, okay. I'll trust you. The first part of that question is really big. I mean, I'll probably just go ahead and speak from first person and give a little background. I grew up in a family that had 8 siblings, matriarchs and patriarchs, who migrated to Seattle from Arkansas, and 5 of them settled in Seattle and lived in close proximity, and they all had children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And a lot of us lived in homes that were family-owned and in very close proximity to one another, and over the generations created several forms of internal family infrastructure, economic, social, recreational, educational, so on and so forth. And so and so you can imagine, we're talking about, I would say by the time I was a teenager, we're talking about, probably somewhere, upwards of 100, plus maybe 120, 30, some odd people who I was either interacting with either directly or, sort of peripherally that were blood family members on a regular basis. In 2020, I can count on one hand how many family members live close enough for me to interact with them, on a daily basis. So, I can't really, the full dimensions of that experience are actually, hard to quantify,
Of course.
they're very visceral. I would say anyone that grew up with strong family connections or strong personal connections, imagine if 90+% of those connections just evaporated over the course of a few short years, right? Those people are not gone, they haven't passed away, but they're just not accessible to you in that way anymore. The implications of that, are emotional, psychological, economic. They play out in how I interact in the world on a daily basis. They frame the way that I'm able to parent my child. Right, the kind of values I can instill in her, the values that I got, were instilled collectively. Right, I didn't learn everything from one person. In fact, if I were to summarize who I was, I would probably have to attribute it to probably at least 9 or 10 people that influenced me, greatly. And so I think, just to really, center my comments on the importance of human connection and community, I think, when we're talking about the impacts of displacement, those are probably the most important impacts. And then, from there, there's a ripple effect. Those have economic consequences. They have political consequences.
Right.
My political identity is informed by all of those connections, right? And again, my child. I think a lot about my child, who's my youngest child, who's 15 now, and thinking about what is her sort of social and sort of political identity. How is that going to be formed over the course of her lifetime, and how can the values that have been transferred across generations into me, how can they be instilled into her, and will there be a break in continuity? Right, and all those things play into the cohesiveness of our community and how we can collectively address problems and be self-determined over the course of the next several generations. So I want to paint a picture that has a continuity between past, present, and future, and say that is the context within the work that we do and how we think about, the importance of it as it pertains to displacement and gentrification, and the policies, again, that's a massive question. There's a huge intersection between the public and private sector. I would say that we just had a comment from a city manager that talked about our housing crisis being a policy issue, or being actually a consequence of policy choices. One of the most recent major policy choices was HALA, the housing affordability and livability agenda, and the mandatory housing affordability provision, which was I think ratified in the city of Seattle in 2018. Right. Which was designed to do a number of things, but there are some major fallouts for Black homeowners in terms of escalating housing prices because of the property values going up, because certain sections of the city, particularly Central District, are more attractive for developers, right? So there's a host of things that are very complicated. I know I'm at 5 minutes.
So I was going to say, I might have to intervene.
But I'm talking fast, so you can't cut me off.
Don't worry. No, I see you. And actually, we'll circle back around that. Don't worry. So I want you to think about that solution, because you're right there, and we're going to circle back around there. But so that means I might give Jennifer, I might give you a little extra slack here, because it actually builds on that question. So tell us a little bit about how the city of Seattle is supporting the needs of seniors when it comes to affordable rental housing. Inye mentioned MHA and and HALA as a framework. So maybe sprinkle in a little bit of that as well.
All right. Well, thank you for the great segue. So as folks know, I'm at the Office of Housing, and our mission at the Seattle Office of Housing is to create and preserve opportunities for people of all incomes to live in the city of Seattle. And we do that through a number of ways. One is by making investments in new affordable apartments and affordable homeownership opportunities. We support policies to create more affordable housing, and we offer direct service programs such as weatherization and home repair to stabilize low-income homeowners. I'm going to talk really about our investments in rental housing today, and then my colleague Soko will be talking later today about some of our homeowner stabilization programs. So OH funds the creation of affordable apartments where the building is restricted, is meant for people with low incomes. That's who lives there, and the rents are calculated to be affordable. And while rent increases can and do happen, it's not whatever the market's going to bear. It's really designed to be more moderated. We have funded over the past 40 years through city investments. Seattle now has over 15,000 city-funded rental housing units in operation across 300 buildings. I think at last count, those units are currently, or apartments are currently serving 26,000 households. At least 28 of those buildings serve specifically the senior population. And across those 28 buildings, that's about 1,500 apartments. We also have quite a number of units that are just for the general population, but when we look at our data, we do see that quite a number of them have senior households living in them. I do want to mention that we're really proud of some of our recent senior buildings, which reflect culturally responsive housing led by organizations rooted in BIPOC communities. And a couple of those examples include the Filipino Community Village in Southeast Seattle, which has 93 studios, 1- and 2-bedroom apartments for low-income seniors. Another great example is the Ethiopian Village Community Center in Seattle, again down in Rainier Beach, with 89 apartments for older adults, with an emphasis on the East African community. And we're very proud to be an investor in the Pride Place. Am I saying that? In Pride Place as well. So, those to me are some recent examples of not just creating buildings, but really creating communities to serve elders. And this would not be possible, the work that we do without, or I should say the work that we do at the Office of Housing is possible in large part because of local resources that we have available. One of those is the Seattle Housing Levy. The Seattle voters have approved 1 bond and 5 levies since 1981 that allows the city to have resources to create exactly this type of affordable housing. And I should mention there is some public engagement happening around the Seattle levy. The current one expires at the end of 2023, and so work is beginning around Seattle housing levy renewal. And if that's something you have an opinion about or want to be involved in, please look for announcements from the Office of Housing about some public engagement that will be happening this fall on the next housing levy. It's a great opportunity to provide your input on what you think you want to see as part of that next levy.
Excellent. So really quickly, just so we can bundle some of these things together, can you share some of the challenges that adult renters face in Seattle and King County, and as well as some of the challenges and trends that you're seeing for older adult homeowners as well?
Thanks. And, I think we've covered, in terms of what we're seeing for trends, we are seeing that the number and percentage of older adult-led households is increasing. I think adults age 55 and over represent approximately 30% of our current households in King County, and that's projected to increase to 47% in 2030 and 62% in 2050. And I think Marco mentioned this, but while the majority of the aging population in King County right now is white, consistent with national trends, the total aging population is becoming more ethnically and racially diverse. And I think that we are seeing just a couple other trends. We're seeing income, what we call median income increase across Seattle. You've probably seen some of the headlines recently. It's now, median income is well over $100,000, but that doesn't mean that incomes are increasing for all households in Seattle. We know that, and that's especially true for seniors on fixed income. So we are going to see, I think, just increasing challenges around supply of housing that is affordable to people who do have low incomes, including our seniors. In terms of trends for low-income homeowners, we do, what I like to remind people, and I think you all know this, is yes, we do have low-income senior homeowners in the city of Seattle. Sometimes people say, oh, are there any left? Like, absolutely, there are left. And we serve them through our home repair and our weatherization programs. And I think really there, it's how do we, from my perspective, how do we help them maintain their home so that they are living in a safe, healthy place, where they're warm, their structure of the house is sound, and we're able to provide them with what they need to be safe in their own home and stay as long as they would like to be able to.
Brilliant, thank you. So I'm going to move right into health. And so Mary Rita, I'm coming to you. And you have served your entire career has been about service to older adults, health needs. And as a clinician, do you see housing as a health need? And then can you tell us a little bit about the connection between housing and health, and how LGBTQIA plus elders, a little bit about the unique challenges they might face?
Sure. And absolutely, housing is essential to health needs. The social determinants of health include social, economic, and physical conditions under which people are born, grow, live, and work, and age. And these affect a person's health risks and outcomes. Housing, especially stability and affordability, physical structure and location, is one of the key determinants. This relationship between poor housing and health is most clearly seen in older people. They have the highest prevalence, of course, of long-term conditions, and people 85 plus spend about 90% of their time in their homes. Housing is central to an older adult's life's outcomes. Housing affordability, the physical quality and location can impact physical and mental health. You ask if we experience this differently, and the answer is yes. Economic concerns and social exclusion impact LGBTQ plus older adults' ability to live in safe and supportive environments, significantly increasing the risk for social isolation and its negative health and mental health consequences. Back to that study I referred to, out of UW from 2016, it stated that the LGBT community has a higher rate of poverty and financial insecurity compared to the straight community. And many older adults are on fixed incomes, right? And we all know that housing costs here are anything but fixed. Another issue for many LGBTQ seniors is that they have been forced back into the closet for fear of discrimination or violence. When confronted with moving into congregate-style communities such as independent, senior communities, assisted living, nursing homes, or even group homes and memory care, not being able to be who they are and who we are creates major stressors that impact one's health. This is why creating a place dedicated to housing and services was so important to our community. We all want to feel welcome and a part of our community, and it's how we thrive and define what quality of life means to all of us.
Excellent, thank you. So in that case, I'm going to, right before I turn it over to you, Emily, I want to just bring up one thing. So more than 120,000 people in Washington are currently living with Alzheimer's disease, and some of the communities that are more impacted than others include the Black and LGBTQIA plus communities. Can you tell us a little bit, Mary Rita, about those living with dementia? What kind of challenges those living with dementia and their caregivers face when it comes to housing?
Sure. According to the Alzheimer's Association, Black Americans and people of color are twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's or other dementia as their white counterparts, but less likely to receive a diagnosis. And this goes back to the social determinants of care and access issues due to discrimination. Housing, safety, and quality of services are high priorities for people living with dementia and their caregivers, and this is no different for the LGBTQ people of all ethnicities. There's stigma attached to dementia in our society, and that is why GenPride has partnered with the Alzheimer's Association to provide support groups for LGBTQ caregivers, and we meet monthly to learn more about the challenges that these folks face, so GenPride can address these specific challenges. For those of you that have been a caregiver or know someone that is, you see or have experienced firsthand that caregiving can have both psychosocial and physical health effects. Women, spouses, and those in lower socioeconomic groups appear much more vulnerable. Compared to non-caregivers, dementia caregivers report higher levels of stress, more depression and anxiety symptoms, and lower levels of subjective well-being. Pride Place, with our health services and case management services, is currently helping caregivers connect to the services they need and ideally allow them to continue to support their friend or their loved one to age in place in an environment of their choosing. You know, I think we all want to be independent as long as we can, productive, and a part of our community for as long as possible.
Perfect, thank you. So, just before I forget, make sure you have your questions written down, because I will be attempting to answer 1 or 2 questions from the crowd because we are running out of time. But again, write down those questions. Hopefully we can get to them. If not, I definitely urge all of you to please connect with our amazing panelists to learn more information about the amazing programs and amazing work that they're doing, as well as just wonderful new places that are opening up to support many of our older adults here in Seattle. So, Emily, I did not forget about you. So, I'm going to package a couple things together. So, trust me, I didn't forget. So, about 1 in 3 people older than 65 live alone. So, Mary Rita mentioned people living alone before, and so do half of people 85 plus. So, do you find that most people want to continue living independently on their own, you know, and what are some of the challenges that you find with that? And then can you tell us a little bit about how Nest connects those adults, whether they're living alone or they're living with their family members, with you know, those the different events, activities, and how that is a strategy, whether they're living on their own or with extended family, strategy to support them aging in place. And then last but not least, can you just describe the impact of housing insecurity on social cohesion and connectivity?
You really did combine my question.
Yeah,
there.
I know, right?
Okay.
I told you I didn't forget about you.
Yeah. Well, as Marco stated, and I feel everyone has already brought this up, that they are choosing to live in their own homes because there's this this idea that it's actually less expensive. Well, it's not an idea, it's a fact, to stay where they live now because there's so many costs associated with moving out, and has been previously mentioned, there's emotional reasons for wanting to stay at home, as well as, you know, rent is more expensive than mortgage, or if you're in a home for 40 years and it's been paid off. Shoot, my notes don't exactly follow what you asked, so I'm going to do my best here. The ways that we support people who do choose to remain in their own homes is with the services that I had mentioned before, that we have volunteers who will help them with small repairs and those modifications that they might need in their home to make them more age-friendly. We also, if they do decide to move, sometimes we do have volunteers who will assist with that process, whether it be with yard work or packing things up. What else? Darn it, you threw me for a loop here. I would say that one of the ways that the ways that Nest connects with other people and with resources, and that the way that it helps them with the impact that housing insecurity has, is that we've seen studies show time and again that social isolation is the biggest risk factor for early death among older adults. And social isolation, increases the risk of dementia by 50%, and it is also associated with higher blood pressure levels and stress levels. And this one statistic has always struck me is that according to the National Council of Aging, health risks around prolonged isolation is the equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And so the things that Nest can help with is that for the various reasons why people want to stay in their homes, we provide the resources and connections to make that as easy and supportive as possible and safe as possible as well. We also are able to bring them to, my goodness, I am really flubbing here.
Oh, no, you're doing perfectly fine. Thank you for rolling with us.
So basically where Nest is that we see that all of the reasons why people want to stay in their homes, because it's in a community that they're familiar with, it's a area that they love, they know where their amenities are, their grocery store, their doctor, their pharmacy, and those are things that they don't want to take away because there's so many other issues that come into aging, medical issues, mobility issues, memory issues. And so we are here as kind of that in between, that while we can't provide medical services or things that require licensed professionals, and we may not be family members, but we try to bridge that gap. And so we are kind of that safety net in a lot of ways to make sure that they can do this safely and with people who care about them.
Excellent. Also, I want to thank you for rolling with me and working with me on that. So I'm going to actually go back to Inye and just start with a question for the entire panel. So just if you could keep it to a minute each, I'd appreciate it. You start talking a little bit about the generational impact of generational impact of gentrification, and I want to expand it a little bit or rather focus it a little bit and talk about the generational impact of housing insecurity amongst older adults in the community, and what does that generational impact look like? So start with Inye, and then we'll just go down the line.
Yeah, so I would say the biggest impact is the vulnerability of the transfer of ownership towards the end of life, and sometimes leading up to the end of life. And so, a lot of the systemic forces, whether it's wealth inequality, like wage inequality, whether it's, the history of inadequate school funding, all these things,
right.
Sort of, funnel into, that moment where when an elder person, either is no longer able to live in their home alone or passes and still has the home, the ability of other family members to actually take on that is an issue. So I would say, that really, sort of focuses, a lot of the attention that Black families had around, gathering wealth and the political dimensions around gathering and having homes as a means of self-determination and providing opportunities for younger people and their family.
Excellent. Thank you. And Jennifer?
I have a brief response to this, which is that I do think when we think about affordable housing, whether that's a weatherization or a home repair program, or others, that that a lot of those models really assume a very nuclear family with like two parents and a kid, and they don't often take into account an intergenerational family and the unique needs there. So I think that's feedback that we've received and something we're trying to work through, because we have to be creative and thoughtful about how we're going to support intergenerational families. We all want to do it, and we kind of have to make some rigid structures work better with broader definitions of what constitutes a family or a household.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Thank you for highlighting that too. And yes, Emily.
When I saw this question, the first thing it made me think of is that not only does the housing insecurity, it places so much uncertainty in an older adult's life, especially when they are on a limited or a fixed income, and then the idea of having to move or to change everything that they know. is just sometimes more of a mental hurdle than a lot of them can take on, again, especially as medical issues change as they get older. But the other thing that for us that we have seen at Nest especially is the impact on their adult children. The fact that they are now seeing added responsibility, both financially and emotionally, for their adult parents. Or yeah, and the added burden. But the other thing I wanted to say is that we also see the opportunities in this, in that working on co-generational housing options, and that there are the home sharing platforms that are available out there now, and we're encountering more adult children who are planning ahead and trying to create multi-generational home situations. So it's wonderful to be able to work with the adult children to help their parents and future generations in that manner.
Excellent, thank you. And then last but not least, Mary Rita.
Well, many of us don't have children, so there you have that. So there's nobody to help and or no one to burden when these things happen. My experience has been is it's two people, spouse dies or the spouse has multiple health issues, and trying to figure out how to hang on to the house is very difficult. That's why we're trying to get into the community and help with case management services to, not only will we have these apartments, we've been helping people all along to try and stay in their own homes, but our situation's a little bit different compared to the straight community, I think.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you. So before I get to the final question, which Mary Rita, I'll start off with you. Do we have any questions from the audience? Okay, I see a couple of people. You know, I'll tell you what. You get that one. I'll get this one. Excellent. Here we go. Excellent. All right. I got one question. I got two questions. Okay, there you go. I got four. I got five. There you go. There you go. Okay. So, unfortunately, we'll not have time to ask, or rather, we'll not have time to ask all of these questions. But I do want to, let's start off with this question is for you, Emily. So is a Nest model one that could be adapted to a community in the Central District to support Black and BIPOC homeowners who age in place?
That is an excellent question, and there's someone in the audience who can actually answer that, because Wider Horizons is one of the villages in Seattle that serves the Central District, and Denise Klein and other members and board members. You guys are the Central yes, yeah? But, so what's the question?
The question is, is
here. Yeah.
Excellent. So one thing I'll say is, which organization are we with, ma'am? Wider Horizons, yes. So I would just say that after this, you should definitely what was your name, miss? Oh, no, not you. Not you, Emily.
Denise Klein.
Yes, Miss Denise Klein. So unfortunately, you don't have time to add you to the panel, as much as I'd love that. But definitely talk to Denise about Wider Horizons, about the Nest model outside of Northeast Seattle. But I do want to touch on one question for you, Jennifer, and this involves state legislature. So if the state legislature exempted cities from interfering with quote-unquote business expectations, would Seattle consider passing an ordinance to ensure fair rents rather than allowing landlords to continue to raise rents that result in economic eviction?
That's a great question, and I'm not able to answer it.
Fair enough. Well, there is one question. So the question is a little bit of a two-parter, and we'll have to go a little quickly. What is the current number of units earmarked for senior housing, and what are the chances of creating the number of housing units for older adults that's earmarked earmarked for older adults in the next levy?
Oh, great question. So right now, when I looked at it, we have at least 1,500 units across 28 buildings that are reserved specifically for seniors or senior population. As I mentioned, we also have a lot of just general affordable housing that's not restricted to a certain population, and we know seniors live in those as well. I think that, as I mentioned, we're just starting public outreach for the next housing levy. The housing levy will be on the ballot in next year, 2023, and we're just starting public engagement. So if you have thoughts about that, about if the levy should address specific needs as related to seniors, I would just really encourage you to come to some of those meetings, or you can also submit comments to the Office of Housing, via mail or email. I think there's multiple platforms because we certainly want to hear from you and what you think the priorities should be in the next housing levy.
Excellent. So we're at time, but I did want to, in all fairness, I did want to ask one thing. So I'm going to really hold you to this, about 30 seconds. But I want to start with you, Mary Rita, and if you could just share one thing that you would like us to know about the particular challenges that older adults in your community face right now when it comes to housing. Really appreciate that.
I think what I'd just like to leave everybody with is that ageism is alive and well, and it baffles me since I don't know anybody getting any younger. So I think I'll just leave it at that.
Excellent. Thank you. Right on. Emily?
I'm going to piggyback on that comment with digital inclusion, that there are so many aspects to housing, finding housing, paying bills, applications, all of that. It requires a smartphone. It requires an email address to sign up for a lot of services. And that's ageism.
Right on. And then Jennifer?
I don't think I can say it any better than that, but I would just say continued affordability. We want seniors to be able to be in the city. We want them to be part of their neighborhoods and to be here. And I think we really have to address issues of affordability to make that happen.
Excellent. Inye, you got the last word, sir.
Yeah, I'd just say, based on what our homeowners said, I would say one of the biggest issues is property taxes, right? And just the cost of maintaining a home. So that's probably a question about the housing levy.
Excellent. Well, another round of applause for our amazing panel.
Right.
Excellent. Now, as much as I would love to take this home with me, alas, that concludes our panel. Thank you very much. Thank you for your insightful questions. And again, I encourage all of you to speak with our panelists after the next couple panels. Thank you.